The show is very much looking into the idea of process, and particularly repetition in the process of art production. It's an area of research that I've been looking into for some time, and Robert Morris, the sculptor, talks about process as being the submerged side of the art iceberg. So the bit that supports all the other things that is talked about art, such as the subject or the object. For those to happen, there's process. And it's a very under-contextualised area of research, really. And the work here in the show is a way of trying to understand what role that process might take in art production, and also to look at the way that it might generate practice as a generative force in its own right.
So what have we got here?
So what you have here with this particular installation, which is 5 television screens, showing the development of pieces of work that are referred to in the large drawings that are around the room. Now the large drawings are metre square spaces in which scribbling happens. So they start off as an empty white square and they end up with a full black square. And the process of change is simply scribbling, perhaps a childish act, perhaps a primitive act. But it does, in a sense, it challenges perhaps postmodern ideas of the way that we look at binary oppositions. And I think with the work, you'll notice that the scribble is defined very much by the edge. So the difference between the inner square being black and the outer of that being white, and the knowledge that at some point that black square would have been a white square, an empty white square. So what I noticed in the production of these very large drawings was that forms and structures were being made that were equally overwritten by the next time of scribbling, in a way. So these particular drawings, all of them are completely different, 5 made to exactly the same rules, and I scribble for a count of 5 seconds and then scan the image. And that scribbling, or that particular process, is repeated 500 times, so until the area is black with ink. And so this is a time-lapse record of each of those moments of 5 seconds of scribbling. And the sound that you can hear on the video installation mirrors that process. So it's a record of me mentally counting to 5 or whispering to 5 while scribbling, repeated. Now, as you walk round this particular installation, and it's in circular form, you'll notice that as each drawing develops, it forms different shapes, different drawings, different symbols within its construction.
Is that because you started in different places on each of the squares?
Well, as the whole research is really looking at repetition, that's a really interesting question to ask, because repetition itself is pretty elusive when we actually search for it. So the idea that anything, including something as basic as a scribble, can be repeated is actually, when you think about it, a very difficult thing to do. And you'll find that as each drawing develops, each of those 500 moments in time in a scribble, they develop completely differently. And they're impossible to repeat over time. So they open out, the forms that are made in the way that the drawing develops opens out into a different scenario for each one of these scribbles. You can see there how the final scribble is looping right back to the beginning. So we had a black square emptying to the white square and then starting again.
And if somebody was here now looking at this, you're the artist, how would you advise them to look at it? What should they do?
I think
what do you want them to do?
It's very important to walk round the sculpture. I think it's something that perhaps is obvious to a sculptor, but less obvious if you're used to looking at drawings, or indeed a flat screen, which we sit and we look at from a particularly static position. So to move around it and consider it as an object in its own right is important, because from that you start to see the differences made to exactly the same rules in each drawing.
The University of Huddersfield, inspiring tomorrow's professionals.